All right, everybody, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today on DNA. You might know them from those mobile games on your phone, but their story, it actually goes way deeper than that.
It really does.
We've got a bunch of stuff here. We've got their website, some Wikipedia, and even some commentary from people who are right there, like making things happen at DNA.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to unpack their whole journey from the very, very beginning and highlight some of the really cool stuff they've done, and then maybe some of the not-so-cool stuff.
Yeah.
And then try to figure out where they're headed next.
Sounds good.
All right, so where do we even begin with DNA? I guess their origin story.
Yeah. So they've been around for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 1999, they were founded. Right at the dawn of the Japanese internet, they started with this online auction service called bidders.
So like a Japanese eBay kind of thing.
Exactly, like a Japanese eBay. And what's interesting is they quickly jumped into mobile auctions. They partnered with companies like Index Corporation.
Mobile auctions.
Yeah, and this is really key because Japan was already adopting mobile tech like crazy back then.
Japan has always been ahead of the curve on that stuff. So did that early focus on mobile, really shape where DNA went?
Absolutely. The mobile landscape in Japan was totally unique. They had these super fast internet speeds, even on flip phones back then.
Wow.
It was like the perfect place for Dena to figure out how to make these really cool mobile experiences.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that leads us up to their big breakthrough, right?
Yeah.
2006, Mobile Town launches. Later, it just became Mobile.
Yeah.
And we've actually got a quote here. Akinori Harada, he used to be an executive at DNA.
Okay.
He describes Mobile Town as completely unique for its time.
Okay.
Basically, a social network, but specifically for mobile.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like social networking and gaming together. And that turned out to be incredibly powerful. Keep in mind, this was way before Facebook games really took off.
Oh, yeah.
So they were kind of pioneering that whole mobile social gaming thing.
They were early adopters.
Exactly.
Yeah. And not only were they early, but they were also really fast with their development.
Oh, yeah. They were known for that.
Ridiculously fast. We've got this anecdote here from Shin Unozawa. He was an executive at Namco Bandai. And he talks about how blown away he was by how quickly DNA could develop and launch their games.
Yeah.
Especially one of the early Gundam social games that they worked on together.
It's interesting, right? Because they were operating at a totally different pace than traditional game developers.
Really different. So that speed, it kind of became their thing, their trademark.
Right. It really shook up the gaming industry. It forced other companies to kind of step up their game, be more agile.
Build or die, right?
Exactly.
But all that speed, all that growth, it came with some bumps in the road.
Right. I mean, specifically those antitrust issues in 2011.
Yeah.
The Japan Fair Trade Commission, they basically slapped DNA with a cease and desist order.
Because they were accused of pressuring game developers into releasing exclusively on mobile.
It was a big deal at the time. Essentially, they were accused of trying to control the whole market.
Stifle the competition.
Yeah. And of course, that led to lawsuits from competitors like DREE and KDDI, and they were seeking a lot of money in damages.
So how did DNA recover from all of that? How did they even bounce back from that?
Well, it kind of forced them to look at their strategy.
Really reevaluate.
Yeah. And it led them to start exploring all these new avenues for growth.
And that's when they started to diversify.
Exactly.
Beyond just gaming, right? So in 2011, the same year all this antitrust stuff is going down, they acquire the Yokohama Bay Stars baseball team.
Wow.
Which, that's a pretty bold move, right?
Totally. It shows they were serious about branching out into the world of sports.
You weren't messing around.
Nope. And even with challenges like, COVID restrictions on attendance, they still managed to create this unique fan experience. Kiyoshi Nakahata, their first manager for the Bay Stars, he actually talks about that.
Cool. So they're buying a baseball team, but also they launch Showroom.
Yes, Showroom.
This live streaming platform, which really took off in Japan.
It was huge, especially among idols and voice actors.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to show you how ambitious they were, they even started getting into healthcare and medical services.
Really?
Yeah. It's they were not content to be just a gaming company anymore. They wanted to be involved in all sorts of things, addressing different societal needs.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we've got diversification, but then in 2015, things really changed.
This is a big one.
A major turning point. They partner with Nintendo.
Oh, yeah.
To develop mobile games using Nintendo's characters.
Power move.
Right. I mean, come on. Mario, Pikachu, everybody loves them.
It made so much sense strategically for both companies. Nintendo wanted to get those characters onto more phones. And DNA had the expertise to actually make that happen.
And the infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a good match.
Totally.
Like a match made in, I don't know, gaming heaven or something.
Yeah.
We actually have a quote here from Yusuke Beppu. He's a Nintendo exec. And he talks about how it was really those shared goals that brought them together.
Nice.
So what was the impact of this partnership, this mega partnership?
Huge. I mean, they released hit after hit. Super Mario Run, Fire Emblem Heroes, Animal Crossing, Pocket Camp.
I've played all of those.
Yeah. And these weren't just popular games, they made billions of dollars.
Oh, wow.
And it really solidified Dena's position as a leader in mobile gaming.
Wow. But it didn't stop there. In 2022, they formed Nintendo Systems, a joint venture to focus on research and development.
That's a long-term commitment.
Right.
Yeah. It's clear that this Nintendo partnership has been a really big deal for Dena.
Yeah. But they haven't stopped experimenting, right? They've been really diving into the world of live streaming, especially with their app, Pococha.
Yeah. Pococha's got a different feel to it than Showroom. It's really resonating with users.
Yeah. It's been a huge success. It's got this really strong sense of community.
Yeah.
We have some really cool quotes here from Pococha broadcasters like Susan and Osaru-chan, and they talk about how positive it's been for them.
It's nice to hear that.
Yeah. So then, on top of live streaming, DNA is also setting their sights on smart cities.
Yeah.
Specifically, they've got this massive project happening in Yokohama that features Japan's first, permanent live viewing arena,
Wow.
which it sounds pretty futuristic.
Yeah, it does. And Yokohama's mayor, Takaharu Yamanaka, he's super excited about it. He's been praising DNA for all their efforts in revitalizing the city.
So DA's story is full of twists and turns.
Right.
I mean, they went from online auctions to mobile gaming to all of this other stuff. They're in sports, they're in healthcare, they're in live streaming.
It's a wild ride.
Smart cities, what does it all mean? What does this mean for DNA? What's next for them? We're going to get to those questions in just a second.
Sounds good. It's amazing, right? They've really reinvented themselves a few times over the years, like from auctions to mobile gaming to all this other stuff.
It's wild. I mean, and that brings us to, the big question, right? What does the future hold for DNA?
Yeah.
Are they going to be a gaming company, a tech company,
Right.
a healthcare company?
Who knows? Maybe all of the above.
Maybe all of the above.
It's probably a question that they're asking themselves, too. But, one thing's for sure.
Yeah.
They got a history of being pretty bold, and they definitely have big ambitions. I mean, remember those antitrust issues?
Yeah.
They didn't let that hold them back. They learned from it, and they came out stronger on the other side. They're clearly not afraid to, try new things, take some risks, even if they run into some trouble along the way.
And one of the things they did after that was really interesting was these key partnerships.
Yeah.
Like with Nintendo.
Yeah.
That seems like a really big turning point for them. But is that it? Is their future tied to Nintendo, or are they going to do their own thing?
Well, I mean, the Nintendo partnership has been hugely successful.
Right.
I mean, some of the most popular mobile games in the world, tons of revenue.
Yeah.
But DNA has its own ideas, too. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. And their live streaming app, Pococha. That's a great example, right?
No.
It's not just about entertainment. It's about building a community where users can connect with each other and support each other. And those quotes we heard from those Pococha broadcasters, that really highlights that sense of community.
Absolutely. And then you look at their smart city stuff, especially that project in Yokohama.
Yeah.
That shows that they're thinking, big picture.
Really big.
Not just making apps and games, but trying to shape the future of how people live in cities. That's pretty ambitious.
So it seems like they're kind of at a crossroads.
In a way, yeah.
They've got this solid foundation in mobile gaming, thanks in part to Nintendo. But they're also pushing boundaries in these other areas that are really interesting.
Yeah. And that's what makes their story so fascinating, right? They're always changing, always trying something new, always pushing the limits.
Always innovating.
Yeah. It's impossible to say for sure what they'll do next, but I think it's safe to say that DNA is a company to watch.
Yeah. Okay, but let's zoom out for a second. Why should our listeners care about all this?
That's a good question.
What makes the history and the future of this, Japanese tech company What makes it relevant to them?
Well, I think their story is a reflection of what's happening in the whole tech world in a way. They've had to navigate this like crazy fast pace of innovation,
Yeah.
and they've had to figure out how to adapt to this constantly changing landscape. And they've really shown the power of partnerships like the one with Nintendo.
Mhm.
So I think their journey gives us some really interesting insights into how companies can survive and thrive in a world that's unpredictable. And that's something that we can all relate to in a way.
It's true. It's like adapt or die, right?
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that even these big, successful companies like DN, they have to constantly innovate. They can't just sit back and relax. The competition's out there and the stakes are high.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot we can learn from them. Their willingness to take risks, even if it means getting into some hot water, whether they're
Right.
making hit games or building online communities or like literally shaping the future of cities. DN is clearly a company that's not afraid to dream big and actually go for it.
And their story's far from over, right?
Definitely not.
We've seen all these amazing successes, but there have been some stumbles along the way, too.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they've been accused of, trying to squash the competition, pushing some ethical boundaries, even putting profits ahead of, like, people's well-being.
Right.
So how do we reconcile those two sides of DNA,
That's a tough one.
the innovative powerhouse versus the company that's, sometimes crossed the line?
Yeah, it's a question we're thinking about. Can a company like DNA, with all its successes and its controversies, can they really be a force for good?
Yeah.
Can they balance their desire for innovation and growth with like a genuine commitment to doing the right thing?
It's like they're walking a tightrope
Yeah.
between, like, pushing boundaries and staying within the lines, and it's not always clear which way they're going to lean.
And that's part of what makes them so interesting, right?
Yeah.
They're full of contradictions, like a microcosm of the whole tech industry.
Yeah, I think that's what makes their story so relevant for our listeners, because in a way, we're all trying to figure out how to navigate this world, with all the new technology and the ethical questions and just the constant pressure to change and adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dine's journey, it's like both inspiring and a bit of a cautionary tale. It shows us what's possible when we're bold and innovative,
Yeah.
but it also reminds us that we need to hold companies accountable, make sure that they're using their power for good.
It's a balancing act.
It is.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into Dena, we're left with one final thought. So as we wrap up this Dena deep dive, we're left with this one thought. Considering everything we've learned, like their past, where they are now, all those big projects they're working on, what do you think their impact's going to be on the future of tech and entertainment? Like, how are they going to shape the world?
It's a big question. It's a really important question. I mean, whether we realize it or not, companies like DNA, they have a huge influence on our lives. The choices they make, they're going to have consequences for a long, long time.
You've given us a lot to think about, for sure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Dena. It's a company that definitely keeps us on our toes.
My pleasure. It's been fun exploring their story with you.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening out there, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.